Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Finley Evans, and this is the Hear Me Out podcast. I literally have absolutely zero plan for today. I've looked at no topics, no scripture, no nothing. I was kind of feeling like the Gospels, like maybe reading something in there and just kind of breaking it down. So that's a plan for today, but how are you guys? How's your week? Happy Friday. I am super excited for this upcoming week because I'm going on some fun trips with friends. But I also, tomorrow morning before I go out of town, I'm making myself do one long run, the longest distance I've ever run. And I'm a little bit nervous for it. And so I'm going to go to bed at 7 o'clock last night because I'm getting up, tonight, because I'm getting up super early to beat the sun because it's so hot to run right now at the sun. So anyways, that's where I'm at. Where are you at? How's your week? What do you have to look forward to next week? All of the things. So, yeah. I went to Passion City Church this past week and for the young adults night, and I went and heard KB speak and Anna Golden sang. She was one of the singers there that night, and oh my goodness, you guys, number one, KB did such a good job. He literally encouraged me so much, and it was so refreshing to hear. But then also Anna Golden, I had literally never heard of her before, never heard her sing anything, and now she's all I've been playing on repeat ever since. I literally love her so much. If you've never listened to any of her songs, I will link below the song There's Still Power in the Blood by Anna Golden. Literally amazing. My favorite song right now. My absolute favorite song. And it's so good. She's such a talented singer. But anyways, that was really cool to hear. And I've absolutely loved listening to her. And all of Passion's music is so good. KB just, I don't know, he talks about returning to your first love of Christ and how it's not that people don't believe in God anymore, because honestly people are searching for something more, and we want to know that we have a purpose, and so it's not hard for us to believe in God, but we just don't believe in his power, and we don't allow the gospel to move us the way that we used to, and we don't honor him. It's kind of everyone wants to believe in God, but the God that fits into their life, which is so obvious, but I don't know. He did a really good job, and then he brought up some Charles Spurgeon analogies, and I really enjoyed it. So, yeah. All right. Let's flip through some of the Gospels and see what we're going to read today. Okay. Let's read the feeding of the 5,000 in Matthew 14. It's kind of a classic, but I feel like it never gets old. Okay. Starts chapter 14, verse 13. If you have your Bible and if you can read along with me, if you are able to, you totally should. We're just going to kind of read slowly and break it down. I'm getting out my pen and my highlighter. And you should do the same if you're able. All right. When Jesus heard about it, pause. We're literally pausing 1, 2, 3, 5 words into the first verse. It says, when Jesus heard about it. So he's about to go withdraw into the boat. But he had just heard about John the Baptist being beheaded. And that was, when Herod was at his party. And he wanted to impress. Let me just read it because it'll make a lot more sense. So 14 verse 1, it says, at that time Herod the Tetrarch heard this report about Jesus. This is John the Baptist who told his servants, he has been raised from the dead, and that's why miraculous powers are at work at him. For Herod had arrested John, chained him up, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. Since John had been telling him, it's not lawful for you to have her, though Herod wanted to kill John. He feared the crowd since they regarded John as a prophet. When Herod's birthday celebration came, Herodias' daughter came and danced before them, and she pleased Herod. So he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she answered, give me John the Baptist's head on a platter. Although the king regretted it, he commanded that it be granted because of his oaths and his guests. So he sent orders and had John the Baptist beheaded in prison. His head was brought on a silver platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. Then the disciples came, removed the corpse, buried it, and went and reported it to Jesus. So, how awful and terrible and disgusting and manipulative and gross that story is. Like, I had never even paid attention to the last sentence, and it says, then the disciples came, removed the corpse, buried it, and went and reported it to Jesus. Like, the disciples and John the Baptist were like brothers. John the Baptist was Jesus's cousin, right? Or it was like their moms. It was like Mary and Elizabeth were cousins, and then so I guess they were like second cousins. I'm pretty sure, and they were close. That's my point. Is they were close, and they have to go, and imagine going and getting one of your best friend's bodies from the jail, and their head has been cut off, and you have to go and bury their corpse. Like, how traumatizing and horrifying and heartbreaking, and like that's the grief and the remorse for like this loss of like such an amazing like disciple of the kingdom of heaven, like, and you have to go and bury their body. Like, I can't even fathom. And then they have to carry that news to Jesus and know the weight that it's going to put on Jesus, even though like Jesus already knows, but like just like the reality of it just like hitting. So that's so sad and so deep and so heavy. And also, something that I thought about while I was reading this was when it says, and it was like the daughter that requested this, it says when she was prompted by her mother. Like, ugh, that's just so evil. And literally what I thought of when I heard that is the little girl I've been babysitting has been so into the live action Cinderella recently. Like, I think I've watched it 5 times this week. I'm not even kidding. Because she is so into it and obsessed with it. She just wants to watch it over and over and over. And she loves Cinderella and being a princess and all the things in the live action one specifically. And I think of the like evil stepmother in that, and how she was like manipulative with the Grand Duke, and you know, he was like promising the prince to like Princess Shalina. Guys, I literally know the names. I watched it so many times. And he like promised the prince to that princess without asking the prince or the king. And then the evil stepmother kind of gets involved with him and is like, has the shoe and is like, look, this is my dirty rat, like slave girl who you guys are looking for. And, but like that would be embarrassing to the kingdom for the prince to marry like a servant girl. And so the Grand Duke agrees, and he's like, okay, like how will I repay you? And she's like, advantageous marriages for my daughter and myself, and you know, all this stuff. And so that's just what I thought of, like the evilness and manipulativeness. I thought of literally the evil stepmother from Cinderella. So all that context to say, verse 13, starting with the feeding of the 5,000, it says, when Jesus heard about it, so when he heard about that beheading and he felt that way, it says, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. And when the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd. He had compassion for them and healed their sick. Okay, so Jesus didn't even like just feed them. Like, he's already healing the sick of this crowd, and have compassion for them. And instead of like, imagine, any hard situations I've been in my life, where I've just like, the times when I have been in my darkest moments, the last thing I want to do is be around a giant crowd of people. Like, I don't know about you, but the last thing that I want to do is be around this huge crowd of people. And yet it says that this huge crowd of people followed him from the towns on foot. And like, Jesus is just trying to grieve this loss of his friend, yet all these people are in pursuit of him. And it says that he had compassion for them and healed their sick. Like, I would be so annoyed and so frustrated. And going back to last week's episode when I talked about how Jesus just doesn't have, like, his emotions are so different from us and so like controlled and just on this higher level that we couldn't understand. And he had compassion for them when he was in the middle of this grief. Like, that's kind of a new revelation to me. Like, I never even thought about that before. When evening came, the disciples approached him and said, "This place is deserted, and it is already late. Send the crowds away so that they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." So it's funny to me how the disciples are like, have seen Jesus do all these miracles, seen him raise people from the dead, seen him, walk on water, do all these things. And yet every time they're still like, oh, like, we need to send them back. Like, they need to get food. Which is just funny because, like, I'd probably do the same thing. Like, no, I'm not throwing shade at them because I don't know, maybe it was just like they didn't want to ask, like they felt weird asking God to do miracles. Like, they had seen him do all these things, and like at this point in time now, we know that like God could at a snap of a finger do anything he wanted to, but maybe it was just that they were still learning this, and so maybe their first response wasn't like, oh, Jesus will do it for a miracle. Like, and the kinds of things that they asked God to do in their life weren't, I feel like nowadays it's just like, oh, please help me to get this and have a good day and to do this and that and this and that. And the kind of things they asked for were like healing the sick and, doing all that. So anyways, it's just funny to me how they were like, oh, like they need to go back to the villages. And then Jesus says, I love this. They don't need to go away. Jesus told them, you give them something to eat. But we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish here, they said to him. Bring them to me. Then he commanded the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. The disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up 12 baskets full of leftover pieces. Now, those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So it literally was, if every man there was married and have kids, that's over 10,000 people. Because if there were 5,000 men, and then let's just say every man was married, that's 10,000. And then kids, like 15,000. Like, it was much more than 5,000. But there isn't a guarantee that everyone was married and had kids. But, like, like a lot of them probably did. So that's just crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Jesus literally said to, like, I can imagine after Jesus did all this and he like gave them all the food, he's like looking at the disciples like, yeah, so like, you see what I mean now? Like, we didn't need to send them away because the disciples were like, send them away so they can buy food. And Jesus says, they don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. And this is a great contrast point. Like, human logic manages scarcity by sending people away and saying, go figure it out. But God's character responds to scarcity by staying present, and he provides, and he sits with you, and he's a problem solver. Like, I don't know, just the way that we look at problems versus the way God looks at problems is like really funny. And they are like, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish, and the disciples name the amount that they have because we like look at something and we're just so like, oh, this is all that we have, like what's right in front of us. And God doesn't need like abundance to work. He starts with what is actually available. Doesn't matter how small it is, and he can take whatever we have in front of us and make it into abundantly more than we could ever imagine. And before the miracle happens, Jesus blesses the little amount of food that there is. And it's worth slowing down on that part and just kind of like leaning into that, Jesus blessing that food, because gratitude and being grateful for what you have can lead to multiplication and abundancy, if abundancy is even a word. But he doesn't wait until there's enough to be thankful. He sits in the small amount that he has, and he blesses it then, and he's grateful for it then. When it says he blesses it, like he's grateful and thanking God for what he already has, and then I'm sure he's requesting more. I don't even know how the miracles work or how that goes down, but like Jesus was grateful. That's like, oh, that's so good. Jesus was grateful before it was multiplied into enough for over 5,000 people. And he was grateful before that. And so that's just like good for us. Like we should start to be grateful before the abundance comes that we're praying for, and begin to lean into it and just be grateful for what we already have. The text says that the count didn't include everyone actually there, like I said. God providing for more than what's officially counted. Nobody left off the list, even the uncounted ones. What's actually cool, too, about this miracle is that there's some cross-references in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 42 through 44, when Elijah feeds 100 men. It says, a man brings Elijah 20 loaves of barley bread and fresh grain. Elijah tells his servant to give it to 100 men. And the servant objects, which is the same logic that the disciples had. How can I set this before 100 men? Elisha repeats his command and adds, for thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left. And it happens exactly that way. And so, like, Jesus feeding the 5,000 isn't just a random miracle. It's a deliberate echo of a known prophetic pattern. Matthew's original audience would have caught it immediately. The point is that God's character doesn't change between testaments. That is so good. God's character does not change in between testaments. It doesn't change from age to age. He is the rock of ages, and his character is unwavering and steadfast and never changing. And the same instinct to provide beyond needs, same leftover as proof detail, same servant and disciple who doubts the math. Jesus isn't just doing a miracle. He's stepping into the identity of God who already did this through Elijah, which is a quiet but massive claim about who he is. So from now on, maybe instead of comparing the size of what you have to the size of your problem, so like the amount of, or like maybe not size, maybe I'll say the amount. Like instead of comparing the amount of what you have to the size of your problem, like the disciples did, they were like, oh, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish, but there's 5,000 men. Instead of doing that comparison, saying like, all right, God, here's what I have. And I know that this problem might look daunting and overwhelming and like a big mountain that I'm about to have to climb up, but I know that you are sufficient enough to provide for me the whole way through. And so instead of being like, oh, like, brick wall, can't go around it, like I'm just stuck right here, instead be like, no, Lord, like I trust you and I know that you are sufficient enough to provide for me in this. All right, let's move on to Jesus walking on the water. Okay, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him on the other side. So it says immediately. I'm curious what the time difference is in between Jesus feeding the 5,000. What's the time difference between Jesus feeding them in up to verse 21 and then in verse 20 when it says immediately he made the disciples get in the boat? How much time was in between that? Okay, so it says that it doesn't give like an exact time, obviously, otherwise I would have known that. But whatever happened between the leftovers being gathered and Jesus putting the disciples in the boat, it wasn't a break. Matthew wants you to feel the pace picking up right after the miracle, not slowing down. So right after this happens, it says, immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After dismissing the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. Well into the night, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat was already some distance from the land, battered by the waves because of the wind against them. Jesus came towards them walking on the sea very early in the morning. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. Immediately Jesus spoke to them. Have courage, it is I. Do not be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter answered him, command me to come to you out of the water. He said, come. And climbing out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid and was beginning to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught hold of him and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? When he got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those on the boat began to worship him and say, truly, you are the Son of God. So, number one, let's break this down. I did not realize, I guess it would make sense that Jesus wasn't on the boat with them, but it says he made the disciples get on the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So I wonder if in the back of his head he was like scheming, like I can imagine Jesus being like, okay, you guys go up there and you don't know it yet, but later I'm going to send a storm and I'm going to come out and walk on the water and show you more of my power because you guys still tend to doubt when situations come up. And it is funny how, like, I can imagine them all just being like, it's a ghost. Like, literally after they saw him multiply all this food, they still don't have, like, their first thought isn't like, oh, it's Jesus. Which, again, if you saw someone walking on water, now we'd think it's God because, like, we've heard of God walking on water before. But if no one has ever in any time heard about Jesus walking on water, and back then, like, spirits and things, it's still, like, present today, but I don't feel like it is as common maybe as it was back then. And so for them to be like, oh, it's a ghost, I mean, it makes sense, but it's just funny that they said that. And then I feel like Peter's funny. I feel like if I were a character in the Bible, I would have been Peter, not because he's funny. I know I just said that, and that's not what I'm trying to say. But I think I would have been him because he is so always like, I don't know, he kind of jumps the gun on everything, and I feel like that's very me, and sometimes I'm like, whoo, I need to slow down. Like when he cut off that guy's ear in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was like, whoa, Peter, put your knife away, sticks the guy's ear back on, no big deal. But like, I feel like I totally am that person who like jumps the gun in situations. And Peter, all of a sudden, like, I feel like his faith kind of jumps the gun, which is good. But he's like, God, if it's you, command me to come out. Like, he's like, I want to do this. Like, and he doesn't doubt that it's God at first, obviously, because I don't think in the middle of a huge storm in the middle of the ocean, like, you wouldn't just get off the boat to, like, try and walk on the water if you didn't have faith and didn't believe in God. And so Peter kind of suggests the idea. Like, it's not even Jesus who's like, come walk out in the water, which I didn't realize that either. I feel like growing up, I've kind of just picked up on the perspective and haven't ever paid close enough attention reading it to realize that it was Peter's idea and not Jesus saying, come walk on the water, like step out in faith, but Peter saying like, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you. And Jesus is like, yeah, come on. But then it says he sees the wind and the power of it, and he gets scared and loses faith, and he begins to sink. And I feel like this ties back into the 5,000 thing, because it's like what you have, and then you see this big problem and you doubt, because it's like they only had a little, but they had so many mouths to feed. It's like Peter had no safety around him, but he saw the wind and the waves, and he began to lose hope, and he began to lose power. Like, it's such a parallel in faith in these two scenes, which is really cool. But he loses sight of Jesus. Like, the second we take our eyes off Jesus, off from being fixed on our Savior, then we begin to lose sight and lose faith and be like, and we begin to doubt. And this past year, kind of the song that carried me through was like, Jesus, I was tossed in the water. It's always on time, I'm pretty sure is what the song is called. And it's like, and Jesus, when I went through the fire, you were right there beside me. You were always on time. And Jesus, I was tossed in the water, but I never went under because you were always on time. Peter began to sink. I'm so curious if that was like, I feel like I picture it as like a slow-mo, like Peter's like starting to like sink and fall down, but I'm just curious like how fast that began to happen. Jesus was there, and like he immediately grabs his hand and it pulls him up, and he's like, you of little faith, like why did you doubt? So think about that. Like sometimes when you are going to reach a problem and you're like, you feel yourself sinking, and then you feel the Lord grab your hand and you're like, oh, okay, like I'm good, like sigh of relief. Like ask yourself, because this is what Jesus asked him, so it's probably what he would ask you too, is like, why did you doubt me? Like, why did you doubt my power? I've showed up before. Why would I not show up again? I told you to come out here. Why would I come out here? God doesn't set you up for failure. The Lord has the absolute best interest at heart for you more than anyone else does, and he has plans to prosper you and not to hold you back. And so, Jesus is your greatest asset. Like he has nothing that wants to be like a liability for you. And so why would you doubt him? Like he wouldn't have asked Peter to come out there, or like he wouldn't have told Peter that it was okay to get out of the boat and walk on the water if he didn't mean it, you know? But again, I'm not throwing shade at Peter, because like I said, I literally would be him too. I would have seen that power, and I have no doubt that I would have sunken. I probably would have sunken faster than he did. Okay, verse 34, miraculous healings. When they had crossed over, they came to shore at Gennesaret, When the men, I do not know how to say that, so I'm sorry. When the men of that place recognized him, they alerted the whole vicinity when the men of the place recognized him, they alerted the whole vicinity and brought him to all who were sick. They begged him that they might only touch the ends of his robe, and as many touched it were healed. They begged him that they might only touch the end of his robe, and as many as it touched it would be healed. So, that's crazy. Like, that's literally like 1, 2, 3 little verses, not going into any depth about the exact miracles that he did, but like it just says as many touched it as were healed. Like, I would love to know like the number of miracles recorded in the Bible versus the numbers that Jesus actually did, because Jesus also is like the kind of guy who like wasn't looking for attention, and he did things in secret because that's what we're called to do. We're not called to do things for the approval of man or to store up treasures on earth, but rather in heaven. And so I'm sure there were 1,000 things that Jesus did in secret that no one saw or knew about other than him and God. And so, and the people he was helping and the people he healed. So that's also a really cool thought to think about. Okay, let's skip to 15:29. And it says, moving on from there, this kind of goes along with what I just said. Moving on from there, Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee. He went up on a mountain and sat there, and large crowds came to him, including the lame, the blind, the crippled, and the unable to speak, and many others. They put them at his feet, and he healed them. So the crowd was amazed when they saw those unable to speak talking, the crippled restored, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they gave glory to the God of Israel. So that's crazy, y'all. Like, Jesus did so many miracles that like we just don't even know about. And can you imagine like all of a sudden like in towns, like the person that you knew to always have this disability, or the people you knew to never be able to see you or hear you or talk to you, like all these things, and all of a sudden they all are, and it's like, how in the world did that happen? Like, you know how we are nowadays with like medicine and things like that. It's like if there's a cure for something, we all, like, the whole world wants to know about it. People go to like cancer research like facilities and stuff for that to be their whole job and what they dedicate their whole life to. So could you imagine if all of a sudden like these people are seeing the kind of people that are like, well, how did you get healed? Like, how do I get my son to be healed of this, or how do I get like myself healed of this? And so I'm sure like news was spreading rapidly about this, and Jesus did it for so many people. So I think that's so cool, but I think that we're going to pause here because I think we're at a good stopping point. I see some that I want to read, but they're in some different chapters. So I think I'm going to save those for next week's episode. So we will continue this next week. So thank you guys so much for watching. I feel like this is kind of an abrupt stop, but I don't know. I enjoyed this. I love diving into some scripture for a little bit of time this week. So if you guys like this and want me to continue this in the next week, let me know, please. I am pulling up our little outro. I need to like have it memorized at this point. But it says, go walk into this week confident, covered in grace, rooted in truth, and if no one else tells you, you are chosen, you are loved, and you carry the light of Jesus with you. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. I love you guys. Let me know if you want to continue this next week. And yeah, I will see you guys later.